Hello, you are on track 3. In a few minutes, we'll start the panel Thematic Bonds as a Source of Resources to Finance Positive Impact. Get familiar with benefits and requirements of this class of securities that finance projects committed to environmental and social benefits, aligned to the growing ESG wave. The panel will also approach specificities of sustainable and sociable green bonds and will show opportunities for investors and project managers in our region. Moderator will be Gema Sacristán, Chief Investment Operations Department at IDB Invest. Johannes and Juan will help us give you an overview of what's happening and how we could use this source of financing to drive infrastructure in Latin America and the Caribbean. The latest studies conducted by the IDB say that Latin America and the Caribbean have to invest approximately $2 billion. In Spanish, it would be $2 million in water, sanitation, energy, transport, telecommunications by 2030 in order to expand and maintain the infrastructure required to achieve the ODSs. In order to fill this gap, we'll have to increase investment by 70%. That means approximately going from 1.8 of GDP to 3.1 of GDP. So it's a very significant increase in investment that will be required in the next few years. Thematic bonds are certainly a major alternative, a feasible alternative that we're starting to see on the market. There was a great boom of this kind of bonds in the last few years, both globally and in Latin America and the Caribbean. And I'd like to start to ask Sean to give us an overview of what's happening both globally and in the region. I'd like to start with Sean Kidney, asking him how the thematic bonds have evolved both globally and in Latin America. Sean, over to you.
So I would need to speak in English because my Spanish is nothing like Emma's, unfortunately. I hope you'll forgive me.
Please.
You know, the big win of the market to date is that we've seen a growth in the global market from when I started working this about $1 billion outstanding in green and sustainable bonds to latest figures, 2.6 trillion. 2.6 trillion US dollars, not pesos here. And that is an extraordinary growth rate over the last 10 years. This year alone, globally, the market will grow 80%. In some countries like China, it's growing 100%. The green portion is 1.6 trillion. Then there are sustainable and social bonds or SDG bonds, such as Mexico's produced that are sovereign, etc. The big growth area has been in sovereigns. Of course, the biggest growth area, the sovereign that counts in Latin America is Chile, because they've done sovereigns with the support of IADB in pesos, in US dollars and euros now, and they got an extraordinary good interest rate. I think the best interest rate they've ever received for sovereigns in the past.
But this isn't only applied to Chile, but also to the UK, the European Union, to Egypt. There is an Egyptian green bond that is being sold in the secondary market at a premium, which is very interesting. In all of these markets, there are clear benefits for sovereign green bonds that are 10 or 11 times. I'm saying this because we believe that next year we will see more issuances in addition to the ones that we've seen in Chile and Colombia.
That's the headline story. In Latin America, we have, however, a relatively small level of issuance. Total outstanding in Latin America now is 27 billion US equivalent in the various currencies. Mind you, capital markets, despite one category's worked for the last 10 years are not as big as they should be. So we'll hear about it from Antonio in a minute, about the work to grow capital markets in the area. But 27 billion is not too bad. We've seen also the growth of sustainability linked bonds. Now, this is where someone like Suzano in Brazil goes to the market in New York and says, I will give the investors an extra interest rate if I don't meet my targets. And these are environmental targets. Very successful. Talk to Mauricio Bacci at Suzano about how successful that bond is and how excited they are doing more. We will see that grow this year. In each of these areas, we need guidance to make it easier for people to understand what qualifies and what investors are going to buy. So two developments there that are important for Latin American issuers in the market. The first is at the COP recently, at the UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, we saw a real change in the character of the COP. It's a COP of finance. There are ministers of finance there, lots, never before. And we saw the announcement of the Glasgow Finance Coalition, GFunds, $130 trillion of investors represented, working to try and promote climate-related investing. 44% now of global assets are represented in coalitions wanting to act on climate. This is extraordinary. This just means the demand side is hunting. And if you can become prey to them, you are going to do well in the bond market. Dress yourself up in green, amplify what you're doing, and make sure you market it accordingly. And of course, get the help of IADB to do that, because I know they've got some technical assistance program money somewhere in there. Make sure you ask them and get it out of them. The opportunity is extraordinary. I mean, there are other wins that are worth noting in the global market. We saw the major economies commit to 2030 targets at the Biden Climate Summit earlier this year. This is amazing because it is now providing certainty to investors that policy is going to change. Now, even if one country falls out, not all of them are going to fall out. They're going to deliver. And I can tell you from discussions in Washington, D.C., in Beijing and in Brussels, that this has been taken very seriously by the governments. Not 2050, not over the horizon, not when Hema finally retires, but rather in the next few years, these changes are going to happen. And that's going to change the world economy, and it's going to change demand for more green. In Europe, we've just passed, at midnight last night, came into force the European Taxonomy of Sustainable Finance, which will guide all disclosures by investors, banks, and corporations in Europe about what they're doing that's sustainable. This is a climate-focused definitional universe, and be able to compare. Investors are in a race to the top to get more. They want more. They want sustainable agricultural investments from Peru. They want sustainable industrial investments from Mexico. They want sovereign bonds from, well, 3 or 4 countries you won't mention now who are currently considering it. The opportunity is there to get it out. So these are very big changes in the last year. You know, in November, the November just passed, in Europe, 44% of all bonds issued were green or sustainable or ESG focused. We're nearly at the halfway market. That's what the future looks like. If you're not doing it, you are missing out on the future. You are consigning yourself to a downward trend. If you embrace ESG, green and sustainable, you will be part of this extraordinary global change that's happening. So while we've seen bonds from many places in Latin America, I'm not going to go through the roll call. You know who you are. The question is, what about everyone else? Can we come to market this coming year? Will we come to market this coming year? I'm confident we will. I'm confident because the institutions are shifting, because the Banco Central do Brasil is very, very focused now on sustainability, on sustainable agriculture, because the government in Mexico is shifting. Hacienda is shifting from its previous things and wanting to support more sustainable investments, because the Colombian government has adopted a taxonomy which mirrors the European taxonomy, which is a guidance for Colombian investors around green finance and green bonds. Because these changes are happening, the foundations are being set in place for what I think will be rapid growth. But just remember, at Glasgow, $130 trillion of investors signed a statement saying, give me climate solutions. That is demand. What they don't have is enough places to put that money. we can do that in LATAM. I'll stop there.
Fenomenal. Entrando ya en algún detalle más
Excellent. And
específico.
now delving more into the sectorial side, where are the opportunities in terms of infrastructure? Thank you.
Agriculture sector in Brazil specifically, as well as FIRA in Mexico, of course. What we need to see now is a growth around green property, energy efficient property, and that's a matter of just coming up with the rule sets. We're working on that in Mexico in particular. We need to work on that in Brazil and Chile and Peru, because property assets represent 2/3 of hard assets on the planet, and the emissions reductions we have to achieve from built environment represent 40% of what we have to do to 2050. Put that two together, there's going to be a lot of green property bonds. Also infrastructure assets. We've got an MOU with the Ministry of Infrastructure in Brazil to bring rail bonds to the market, for example. We need more of those. Well, actually, there's railways scattered throughout LATAM. Each one of those can have extensions financed or refinancing in the green bonds, sale bond sector. Where we're tackling electric vehicles in some countries, that'll become a play. But industrial transitions. Steel has to move to using hydrogen. This is happening in Europe and happening in China. We will see opportunities come up for industries. Concrete, Cemex offers a low carbon concrete. That's what we need more of. In fact, all concrete should only use that Cemex product. But of course, that's also an asset that can be funded for the green bond market. So if you start looking through all the areas of the economy that count, there's a lot. But next year, we will start rolling out criteria, understanding rule sets for resilience. Because, of course, Latin American countries are some of the most exposed nations in the world to the effect of climate change. And it was an IADB conference on climate resilience that took me to Cartagena for the first time, where I discovered that the roads are already being washed away by sea level rise. Resilience and preparing for the climate change that has started will then become a feature of issuance in coming years. If you're funding infrastructure to make it ready, if you're funding ports so that they're raising the wharves to be ready for the changes, if you're funding social infrastructure, health systems that help your populations become ready for the changes, the more pandemics you're going to receive and things like that, that will be eligible too. So that will especially play into sovereign issuance going forward. We'll move from mitigation towards resilience in LATAM. So the opportunity in terms of the increased universe that we're getting to, the greater understanding of what we've got to do, whether it be transition bonds or blue bonds or green bonds, these are all part of the same theme, is very, very large. My advice to everyone is get in now, engage with it, start using it, because the opportunities will grow. And depending on the business you're in, but especially if you're a government or a subnational government, you can issue like a state in Mexico. There's a lot to be looked at here. And, you know, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be getting a bunch of investors who stick with you. As the big investors say, green bonds makes investors sticky. They stay, they come back, and they keep bidding tighter. That's what you're going to get if you get into the space now. They'll go with you through the journey of the changes that are going to be happening in your company, in your state, in your country over the next 10 years.
Fenomenal.
Wonderful, thank you. And now focusing particularly on some points, I would like to talk about the issuers. So if a public-private organization decide to issue a bond to fund a project, they could resort to the traditional banking system and their instruments. And I'd like to ask Cassiano the following. Brazil, without a doubt, is one of the Latin American countries that, well, has an infrastructure agenda that is the most ambitious agenda. It would be interesting to hear you talk about the role these bonds can play, because it'll be impossible to finance this agenda with the banking debt alone. Cassiano.
Good afternoon, Gema. Good afternoon.
So I would like to thank you very much to be participating in this event. I would like to congratulate the IDB for promoting this forum full of important professionals in the public power and private initiative, and allow us to have a discussion on relevant topic regarding infrastructure in the country. The idea of this panel now is to discuss theme bonds to finance positive impacts. So our mission today is to discuss projects committed to the environmental benefits as well as social benefits in line to the growing wave of those areas. Our idea is to work on this topic based on the actions that are being carried out by the state of São Paulo, especially by our infrastructure and environmental secretariat in the state. And just to put things into context now, the beginning of this administration, the state of São Paulo government defined a number of priority projects involving all the secretariats in the state, tackling a number of issues, a number of topics, and among them the social protection, innovation, and finally competitiveness. As far as social promotion is concerned, our targets were promoting social mobility and expanding housing and improving basic sanitation services. Starting there, a number of projects are being carried out, budget projects, among them the implementation of barriers so that we could ensure water supply universalization of sanitation and drinkable water, an improvement in the water and sewage treatment, and also catering to services to municipalities that are at a risk of water scarcity. In terms of innovation, we promoted an innovative public management, and that will be carried out by some innovations such as the development of Ribeira Valley in the south of the state, where we have 22 towns, that is a needy region, the implementation of energy efficient projects in public buildings of the state, and also the development of Pontal do Paranapanema and the west of the state, with 32 towns that also demand a number of actions for expansion and investment. Finally, in terms of competitiveness, the targets defined by the government were to improve business environment and to promote entrepreneurship and employability, and also to promote and environmental management. The state has then been developed a number of projects, the revitalization of Pinheiros River. The Pinheiros River crosses the town, and it is a degraded river, and the state committed itself to improve the quality of this river. Also, there is another river in the state of São Paulo, which is the Tietê River, and there's a cleaning process is being developed for this river as well. In addition to that, recovery process for the river, in addition to several other actions in terms of energy solutions, such as using clean and renewable energy by the means of using of photovoltaic energy, also the use of biomass so that we can have energy from biogas, also starting and working with a sustainable approach and with the objective of generating income and regional development. And an important action that the state is developing is the concession of state parks. As all of you know, the public power lacks public funds, and it ends up not being able to manage its own properties in an efficient fashion. Because of that, the state is promoting the concession of its parks by the means of PPPs, where the concessionaire has the right to explore the park in a way that is good for the population, for their own businesses, and for all the society. In a brief summary, then, we have three main topics that are very important in terms of the state's concern, which are basic sanitation, clean and renewable energy, as Sean mentioned, and efficiency in public management. And within this agenda of efficiency in public management, the state is working. And Gema, I don't know how much time we have, but I have a quick presentation, if you don't mind, to explain what is the work that the state has been doing in the concession area. The state is developing a concession program of environmental assets, and the purpose here is to improve the use of the public areas. As I quickly mentioned, the state cannot manage effectively, cannot bring attractiveness in a way that the parks can be managed in an effective fashion by the population in general. So based on those assumptions, the state now has a program that aims to have the public use, environmental education, the right use of the public space, the creation of leisure activities, greater public visitation, and all of that allows also private investments, and obviously the use of tourism as a generator of income, starting with the tourism, and tourism ends up being a main source or an important source of employ and jobs and also income, and it fosters the local economy with the park visitation and also hotel stays and restaurants and food consuming. Therefore, it's possible to improve visitation, and it generates income for local population, and that strengthens the conservation of the park, and that is a continuous circle that is good for everyone. Since 2008, the state has already promoted a number of concessions. Here we have some of the parks that have already been bid. Among them, the Campos do Jordão, Capivaris Park, also Jardim Botânico, the Zoo of São Paulo, Caminhos do Mar Park, Cantareira Park, and also Love Green Park. And there are others ongoing. This is a business model in which the state already sees results. All of these projects obviously are in line with the ESG agenda, and they allow the development in a sustainable fashion.
Thank you. We continue with Rodrigo. In Concession, you issued the first social bond for an infrastructure project in Latin America to finance a highway. I believe that this was innovative. Rodrigo, could you please tell us about the mechanism of the bond and why you decided to finance this project with a bond and a social bond when generally these projects are more connected to green bonds? Thank you very much to everyone, and especially to IDB, to invite us to talk about our experience, to give our point of view, and why. Why did we create a social bond and not a green bond? We are within an infrastructure where the green bond, unfortunately, we haven't been able to put asphalt that is green. So within the philosophy, the strategy is to be ecological, to be the most social possible. We want to create value in society. In order to be a profitable company, the only way is to give value to our customer, that is the management, but also our end customer. So we do everything from So we want to be sustainable with the environment. We want to be sustainable socially. People will appreciate what we do. And this is what we have been doing for a number of years. We have always focused on this. This is why we do not have problems. And because we have worked in a number of projects with you in the IDB, where we also respect social and environmental policies that are most restrictive policies. But it really doesn't matter because it is part of our DNA. We want to live in a better world and we have to respect it. Not everything is just to make more money on harming other people. So we wanted for the market to realize that we were fulfilling this. This is why we went to a rating agency and showed everything that we have done, and we wanted them to include this as a social bond. This is why we created our social bond. It is important to mention why we make bonds. We've had great knowledge, and we have established 20%. We have grown 20%. In 2015, our funding was 100% from the bank. Now this only represents 30%. We have divided our portfolio and our funding agency. 30% is funded by banks, because it is funding that allows us to be flexible in projects when we're under construction. But we believe that the spectrum, and when we deal with bonds, it is higher than when we deal with banks. We work with long-term projects, not short-term. When we end the construction phase, we directly have eliminated many of the risks of the project. This is why it is a good moment to invite long-term investors like pension funds, insurance companies. We have an excellent format, and this is a bond, public or private. When we issue these type of bonds, we want part of the wealth to remain in the country. This is why we invest a lot in national markets like in Uruguay or like we have done in Chile, because it is good for the wealth to remain in the country, and international investors should also complement this. Now, what do we believe? That we have to continue on this road. We have to be committed with the social, with the environmental area, and to improve standards so that we become a sustainable company. And mainly, we believe that it's the only road in order to be feasible in the long term and with important benefits, and to adapt the different type of financial institutions to different structures, projects, and the different stages of the projects. And this is why we've selected this format and this type of financing. Excellent. We've had the pleasure to work with you in a number of occasions, and we've had an experience that has been fantastic. And we were talking about the global market, the issuers. Now I would like to pivot and talk about the investors. We've seen a boom of sustainable investments. We have had an outlook regarding what is happening in the world and in Latin America, where we see the signatories of responsible investment principles increase more. And as it was mentioned, in reality, there is more supply than demand, more demand than supply. And we need bonds for all these signatories, like institutional investors have opportunities to invest. With this, I would like to give the floor back to Rodrigo so that he can briefly tell us who bought the first infrastructure social bond in Latin America. It was bought. These were local investors that bought it. They bought it because it was in local currency. It was geared toward them. But it's important to say what this social bond allow us to do. That one multilateral bank, BAFC, is guaranteeing the project. and they were strongly committed with the project. This is why they issue it. At the end, what we have seen is when we demonstrate to the market that we're doing things right, this helps, and the investors were happy to invest in these type of project. And for multilateral banks that support us, well, they recognize this. And after issuing the bond, we have, and many investors have come to us to work together with us with these type of projects. You know, Puerta, this is not the only social bond. We're focusing on another bond that we wanted to be social, which is a refinancing project, and we're close to materialize this in Colombia, and we're working together with IDB and with a new structure different from Puerta de Hierro. But regarding the social side, we have even met more requirements than what we met in Puerta de Hierro. Excellent. Thank you very much. Interest in developing local markets and the new asset classes. I would like to give the floor to Cassiano to see if he can briefly elaborate on the infrastructure debentures. That is a financial product which has tax exemption to foster infrastructure development in Brazil. The tax exemption was focused on the retail investor. Now there is a project that, well, you're waiting for this to approve this in the Senate, and you want this exemption to go to the institutional investor, but also the global and the local investors to bring more investment in Brazil in the area of infrastructure. Cassiano, could you please elaborate and tell us which is your view regarding these debentures, and how do you think that this new project that wants to incentive not only the Brazilian investors but foreign investors, how can it enable to finance the great infrastructure agenda in Brazil?
Currently, Gema, the income stemming from incentive debentures are tackled by on a specific law, and they are subject to 0.something for income tax for individuals and 0.15 for companies. There is a bill of law in the Senate to create a new mode of debentures. They are called infrastructure debenture, and they have tax benefits for issuing companies for commissionaries and permissionaries of public service. Therefore, an issuer can discount that from income tax and CSLL, and the objective is to increase the number of investors and to attract pension funds that already have income tax exemption in their books, and the incentive debentures are not attractive to them. The creation of these debentures has an objective to create investments in the private sector in specific areas because they allow better remuneration. If approved, it's possible this mechanism will attract the interest of players, international players, and investors for projects in Brazil, creating the availability of financial resources and accelerating the implementation of projects in the country. Just this year, we will have in Brazil an auction for transfer of rights in a specific oil area in Santos with a bonus of 11 billion reais in investments of 204 billion reais in the development for oil and gas in the next years, and also with power transmission with investments of over or almost 3 billion reais in construction stage from 36 to 60 months.
Un fondo dedicado a bonos verdes. Ese fondo que invierte, como hemos dicho, en bonos verdes. Gracias.
Spanish, but I prefer to do it in English. Most of the terminology is in English anyway. So thanks to IDB Invest for inviting me to this panel. It's really a pleasure to be here. And maybe just a few words on the fund itself. So it's, as far as I can tell, the first green bond fund exclusively dedicated to Latin America. And it was set up with seed capital from the German government and the European Union at the time, and structured by KfW. Although we got, particularly in the inception phase, a lot of help and support from IDB, from Juan Ketter's team, actually. It is today managed by a private impact investment firm, Finance Emotion, and Santander Asset Management, and it was de facto launched at COP26 in Glasgow, so it's a very young fund. So what prompted our decision to launch this fund? I mean, we're one of the largest issuers of green bonds worldwide, KfW, and also one of the biggest investors, but we're mainly active on the developed markets. So Le Green is actually one of our first steps into an engagement with emerging markets. And as Sean mentioned, green bonds around the world are high in demand, but short in supply. So what we wanted to design is a vehicle, a fund that is not just pumping additional liquidity into the market, but that is actually able to support green bond issuances, additional green bond issuances, and the diversification of additional green bonds. So we have a very clear supply side mission. And on our demand side, I would say our mission is to link more international investors to green bonds made in Latin America.
Muchas gracias. Hemos mencionado
We
antes
have also
esos
mentioned
inversionistas
these
institucionales
investors,
locales,
the
¿no?
local institutional investors of the region, especially insurance companies and pension plans. Do you see them investing in theme bonds in the region? Because many of them are in local currency, in long-term, which sometimes go against their views.
Each investor is different and each market is different. I mean, if you look at particularly the international investors, most of them, I mean, many of them are looking for US dollars, benchmark size, investment grade, and internationally traded. Yeah. So we don't want to be just another one of these international investors. So we can do local currency as well. We can do small tickets. We have local trading capacity with Le Green, or are working on local trading capacity in many of the Latin American countries. And investment grade is not our primary focus. So I think we can, I'm not sure if it makes too much sense if a Brazilian investor puts money into a Luxembourg vehicle just to reinvest the money again in Brazil. I mean, we can talk about that, obviously, but I guess that's not our primary target group. But there are, I mean, you don't have to invest in Le Green to cooperate with us. I think there are opportunities for co-investments. That's something we did with you guys, with IDB Invest in our first transaction in Costa Rica. Or if you just need TA, I think for supporting investees that you want to invest in, talk to our TA facility guys. I mean, Le Green is not just another fund. It is actually, well, a deal-oriented, I would say, a deal-oriented platform for partnership.
Well, I would like to hear the multilateral agencies. There are different players that have an important role in the creation of these type of issue of these bonds. We have the issuers, the exchanges, the companies that give second opinion, certifying companies, but also the multilateral agencies have a relevant role. I would like to give the floor to Juan so he can talk about the IDB group perspective, the biggest agency in the LAC region, and tell us what have we done in the region in order to drive these green bonds. Well, I'm going to speak in Spanish.
So, gracias. Es un gran placer estar
It is a pleasure to be with you, Gema, Johannes, and Sean. that have helped us so much throughout this journey. This is a long journey that we started a long period ago. And with the rest of the speakers that are with us today, we started this journey a long time ago. It was 2006. And since the day we have made progress in many directions, trying to work with a holistic focus to develop the green bond market. And we needed to work, number one, with the issuers, and we've carried out an important job with them hand in hand with everybody that is here today, so that the issuers could structure and identify different portfolios and to satisfy frameworks and also to meet all the climate bond investment protocols. And this has been a long journey, and as a result, we practically today we have supported 30% of the market regarding all the issuance, and we have supported them one way or the other. So this has been step number one. Now, step number two, what we've done, we have developed instruments, not only the bond, but we've also developed the market. And for this, we have some type of guide or a light that would guide what we did. One would be to generate an asset class that is important in order to generate sufficient liquidity, and we wanted this to be a regional market, unlike other markets that have been local markets. If we are able to accomplish both things, this will give a positive kick to the development of this market. We've done a number of things. We've worked with the regulators in order to improve the regulatory environment. We have improved risk profile of some insurances, especially our colleagues from Risk Invest with guarantees and warehousing. We've also organized anchor investments. And as the last point, something that is not totally materialized, we are thinking about the possibility of organizing on a genuinely bond market, tokenizing some issuance and looking for a compensation mechanism that is based in a distributed ledger technology, so that we are able to maintain and we're able to foster and this is the result of trying to resolve another problem that we faced, that was transparency, bond transparency. In the beginning, there was a problem to identify who was green, who wasn't green. They were called greenwashing. And now I believe that it's not so much greenwashing because it is clear. It would be green wishy-washing because these are, details. It's not clear. It's not clear greenwash. It's something in between. For this, in order to help our investors, especially the investors, so they could discriminate the instruments that are within a green orthodox bond or the ones that are on the outside, on the gray side, we have developed a platform with help of Sean and also the help of Class WWV and Restless Johannes that has always supported us.
So this platform, was created over the last years, and we actually deployed it last April. Actually, April last year, and it is now a benchmark at a global level in terms of, platforms that can do what this does. What it does is the following. It allows for investors to verify and to follow one, the allocation of proceeds, second, the impact of investments one of the key aspects to actually list an investment as green. And right now, we have 115 bonuses on this is a platform that comprises 13 countries. 21 billion US dollars are listed in the platform, and after it was deployed in April, we have 66% of the investors in the region telling us that I'm convinced that next year we are going to hold 100% of the market share. So it has been an important contribution, and well, that is why we thought of extending it to a platform where bonuses can be traded. And that is going to be our next step going forward. But I just wanted to announce it. So in my team, my team is always telling me, don't forget to share the link, the platform link. And I thought to myself, no, I'm not sharing it, because today, if you Google green bonds, TR, you will be taken to our platform, to our website, meaning that it's already recognized in the Google space. And I will invite you all to try it out, to look it up and see how it works for yourself, all that it can contribute. And I know we're pressed for time. Thank you. Thank you, Juan. Yes, without a doubt, it has been an important effort. It is what we want to continue doing as a group, to scale activities like this one and these assets. And yes, we have to adjourn. We are pressed for time. However, I would like to thank Sean, Cassiano, Rodrigo, Johannes, and Juan for all that they have shared with us, and bringing to the fore the latest initiatives that are taking place and the potential for financing projects that contribute to social, environmental development in Latam and the Caribbean. Thank you once again. I'd like to thank our panelists and the participants for joining us today. Thank you. Thank you.
Soon.
Adiós.